A lovely morning to our participants and welcome to the fourth session of the Environmental Law Teachers Online Training Program. This training program is developed by the Legal Education Board in partnership with the Asian Development Bank, International Union for Conservation of Nature Academy of Environmental Law, and the UN Environment Program. I am Attorney Maria Romina Bigumal, Program Coordinator of the Legal Education Board, and I will be your host for today. The topic for today's session is the key environmental issues and recent developments in environmental law. Before we get started, for a brief recap of our last session, we discussed the topic on methodology in the teaching of environmental law with our resource speaker at Professor Amanda Kennedy. The lecture focuses on the importance of curriculum development in teaching environmental law, including theories of learning, constructive alignment, learning environment, student engagement, and reflective practice. Now, to begin our session, I'd like to go over our house rules. Please let us know if we could record this session today. We will only start recording if all parties consent to the recording. Mute your microphone while waiting for others to join in and when speaking in session. Use the chat box option if you have questions or comment and click the reaction option to interact with our speakers and guests. The links to the registration form as well as the evaluation form will be sent also in our chat box. So we kindly invite everyone to fill up their attendance sheet, attendance form and evaluation form. We remind also everyone that the issuance of the training certificate requires your attendance to at least 9 out of the 12 sessions provided in this training program. So for today's session, we will also be having our breakout rooms. The topics for the breakout room session will depend on the Padlets we shared to you last Monday. For those who haven't shared their inputs through the Padlets, kindly access the link shared in our chat box. All right. As a continuation of our lecture during our first session, we have with us today Attorney Griselda Mayo Anda. Attorney Mayo Anda is an environment attorney with over 30 years of field-based practice in environmental advocacy and community-based resource management work in the Philippines. She established the ELAC in 1990, now one of the Philippines' most active NGOs, working to empower communities and local stakeholders to protect their natural resources. She is now the currently executive director of ELAC. She is also known as Dirty to family, colleagues, and friends. Attorney Mayo Anda has more than 2 decades of programmatic and managerial experience in various areas of nonprofit work, including policy development and advocacy for conservation. She has received several awards and commendation for her environmental work, including one of the Condé Nast Travelers magazine in July 2000, which reselected her from the list of global candidates in recognition of her work with the Palawan indigenous communities and the creation and establishment of ELAC. She is a professor by heart, a lecturer and research person on seminars training organized by the Philippine Judicial Academy, alternative law groups, and government agencies in environmental laws. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Attorney Griselda Mayo Anda.
Good morning, everyone. Mabuhay. I hope you're all safe and healthy. Greetings from the rainy area of Palawan at the moment. So I hope there'll be no power outage. So let me share my screen. Okay. It's good to be back and interact. Let me put this on slide mode. Okay. So my task is for 30 minutes, try to initiate a discussion on key environmental issues and development. So I borrowed the poster of the DNR just to stress that when you talk about environment and natural resources, it's really comprehensive, complex, it's from ridge to reef. And I actually situated the discussion of environmental issues, not only looking into mining, forestry, fisheries, but also looking into other issues like policy, energy and mining policy, or the build infrastructure policy, and then the weak enforcement, plus the threats to environmental defenders, because all of this actually lead to an issue affecting the extent by which we protect our natural resources and the environment. Okay, so biodiversity loss, just quickly, we know that we are a mega diversity country, but also we are a hotspot. Scientists I have talked to say we are the hottest of the hotspots when we talk about biodiversity or mega diversity status. And the Luzon ecoregion, just to highlight several data from the government and from conservation groups, um, WWF said that for more than a decade now, more forests have been cleared. And it's very disturbing that you have the country's largest cities in the ecoregion, and many of the areas already devastated. So just quickly for pictures, Sierra Madre is a protected area, but there's a road that's about to be built. I think it's being built at the moment with no environmental impact assessment. And we have seen these photos and many photos of forest wounds. Okay, every time there's heavy rain, we do not even need the typhoon. Heavy rain, okay, we suffer from this. These are photos I borrowed from the Forest Foundation of the Philippines because it is an illustration of an attempt by a former governor, Grace Padaka, to nip in the bud illegal logging in the area of Isabela and also that area, no, of Cagayan. But unfortunately, she lost after 6 years. But you can see here that the illegal loggers actually use the water area, the water body, to transport the logs. Okay. In Palawan, it's Carabao logging, but here they really use the water. And we have seen critical watersheds like in Bulacan, which have been destroyed by illegal logging and charcoal making. And then here in Palawan, distinctively here, it used to be in Tawi-Tawi or also Zamboanga, but big mangrove areas are being debarked. It's a word that was invented to actually use the bark as an element to dye cloth or as an element of tuba. Yung tangal, if the, some Visayans know that. Okay, and we have seen how indigenous peoples had to use their tagad to be able to do this, and yet years ago they were just paid 1 peso per kilo. So that's such a measly amount. So it's an ongoing problem in southern Palawan. We've never had a forest area of Syrups tangal mangrove species, only in Balabak, southern Palawan. And that's the reason now why we have crocodiles now encroaching into residential areas and attacking people. So many people have been killed annually. Okay. It's a big debate now. And in Mindanao, we've seen large plantations. They opened up forests and, of course, mega dams, plantations, and also mining. Now, Zambales has an ongoing problem with mining. I think Attorney Maki would probably be familiar with this, and also Surigao. The mining companies continue to operate, and while there was an attempt to actually suspend some of the mining companies here during the mining audit under former Secretary Gina Lopez, I think they still have continued to operate. This is Manicani, still part of a protected landscape and seascape. So it's an ongoing legal battle. There's a harassment suit here. Uh, Attorney Maki knows that. I want to highlight the Visayas issue on oil spill because we cannot forget that once upon a time, there was a massive oil spill, and until now, the mangroves are still suffering from that accident. So it takes years to actually rehabilitate. I'm showing this slide because it's good to highlight the fact that where protected areas are, you see the illegal logging hotspots, the yellow ones, the yellow circles are the illegal logging hotspots, and also the wildlife hotspots. Okay, because we do have wildlife trade, pangolin from Palawan, the tarsier, birds, and a lot of animals. And this slide also shows us the conflict. You have mining telements, coal, petroleum service contracts. If you look at Palawan, around it are all petroleum service contracts. Fortunately, we were able to cancel one service contract that encroached into the Tubataha Reefs Natural Park. And there are coal plants in several areas. Okay. I'm showing this slide to stress governance because this slide from an old strategy action plan of the DNR, and we were part of the workshops. We pushed for the incorporation of biodiversity in comprehensive land and use planning. Okay, and many others. Like example here, we are pushing for the National Land Use Act as a remedy, but it's been pending in Congress for almost 2 decades now. And financing requirements is also important because how do we make sure that the share of national wealth from use of natural resources really benefit? Economic valuation is there, and I'm going to go back there later. And it's important to also take note that you do have Bantay Gubat, Bantay Dagat, Bantay Kadti. These are watchdogs in English, no? All over the country, but they're not paid. Okay, they're not sufficiently paid. They do not even have incentives, but they're very important because the DNR has only one forester to take care of 4,000 hectares of forest. Okay, and also socioeconomic factors, of course. So I highlighted this from the several consultations, and I think they're still very relevant. Okay, on the coastal and marine ecosystem, I'm showing this slide because each time that we do a workshop on fishery law enforcement, these are the things that are articulated by fishers, okay, by municipal agriculture officers, by the Coast Guard and law enforcers. So they're all over the country as well. Dynamite and cyanide fishing is still taking place, okay, and we know that siltation is caused by even development projects like reclamation and building of infrastructure. So we do have coral reefs which are still subjected to a lot of destruction every year. And if you take a look at our coral reefs, most of them are in the marine protected areas, no, or like Tubata Reef Natural Park, the Verde Passage, and a few areas. Muruami is taking place still and mobilizing miners from Negros. So while we have substantially reduced it, it's still it's illegal, but it's taking place in some parts of the Sulu Sea. Okay, I'm showing this slide to stress that there are ongoing initiatives to address illegal fishing like this in Negros. Okay, and then the mangroves. If there's a species or if there are species in the country which is covered by stringent policies, these are the mangroves. Even if you planted them, you cannot even cut them. You can only trim them. And the RA 7161, which amends the forestry code, is so strict. And the old growth mangroves are found in the beautiful province of Palawan. And the fish ponds, while not allowed, the new fisheries code actually says it should be given to municipal fisher fox cooperatives, but there are abandoned fish ponds which have to be still dealt with. So we do have these issues, plus seagrass beds. Okay, seagrass beds are habitats also of our fishery resources, and we have identified a lot of seagrass beds which have been threatened. Now, wildlife. Okay, wildlife smuggling. I took these pictures in Chinese poachers' vessels, which I, modesty aside, have been able to visit, okay, during part of our enforcement. So you can see years ago, marine turtles, green sea turtles, okay, these are endangered. And the big ones, the hawksbill turtles, are critically endangered under the Wildlife Act. Okay, so they still exist. And black corals. Black corals here, to the credit of former BIFAR Director Asis Perez, they nip in the bud this operation. So black corals are very important. They are being smuggled from the Philippines. Plus giant clams. This was also an operation in Cebu, in the island Punto Engaño. I forgot the name, but there used to be, okay, a lot of operations there gathering corals and also white giant clams, 4,000 to 6,000 each. Where are they used for? Not for the poor, not for food security, but for ornamental purposes. So kung Tagalog kaartihan. Okay, wildlife trade. And so the trends, in addition to all this, mining, deforestation, fishery, coastal and marine resource destruction, it's also good to look into other resources like the scarcity of water. Okay, very, very important. And pollution. Pollution, the deterioration of our farmlands is very important because that's farmers are like, almost 60% of the population. And Other trends is, despite our laws on ecological solid waste management, we still do have a lot of waste being generated. So tons and tons, and nationally environmentally acceptable packaging, NEAP, under RA 9003 is not yet implemented. Okay, so non-environmentally acceptable packaging, NEAP materials, plastic, single-use plastics, which end up as microplastics, is still a pestering problem. Medical waste, okay, and then the e-wastes, because we do not have an expanded producer responsibility policy, EPR. So basically, a lot of these computers, you see them in several offices, okay, a lot of waste, and there's no concrete um, action yet on how to deal with them. Okay, and then just to end the first topic on the biodiversity loss and habitat destruction is our vulnerability to climate change. So according to the risk resiliency report, 70% of our cities in the Philippines are already dealing with the effects of climate change, and 90% of our urban areas in the coastal areas are then at risk. So that's troubling. I'm showing this slide from the OST just to stress the continuing increase in annual mean temperature. So these are things that we have considered. And of course, we are very vulnerable. Top 3, top 2, top 5. Every year you see that. And who can forget the 2013 Haiyan typhoon? But you do not even need a Yolanda, because you can have a Gloria, a Maring, okay, which was recent, and many other typhoons that can wreak havoc to our people, to our natural resources, to our lives, to our livelihood. So devastating impacts are ongoing. Okay, on the next issue on weak enforcement, I'm highlighting here a speech by Dr. William McGrath, because it applies to all crimes. You see means, motive, and opportunity. And I think in the Philippines, it's very relevant. You have corrupt government systems still there, and the motive is either poverty, need, and then greed and power. So if that exists, plus there's an opportunity because of weak enforcement, then it's a perfect recipe for an environmental crime. And it's important to highlight the roles of the judiciary, of lawyers, of law enforcers, of law professors in this effort. Um, Oil palm plantations in Palawan and Mindanao are illustrative of weak enforcement, because there's been no environmental impact assessment. And where I work, free and prior informed consent has not been done. Okay. And in several studies by academic institutions and NGOs, they have highlighted the adverse impacts of conversion, the extensive use of water, and the biodiversity loss. Okay. This is one case we have, because in the province, you have a special law that provides that all natural forests are core zones. So it's only in the strategic environmental plan for Palawan. But unfortunately, the government awarded 3,500 hectares of natural forest to a hybrid coconut plantation. We're not against coconuts per se, because we patronize them, no? Virgin coconut oil. But why does it have to be established in a natural forest area, which is ancestral domain? So it's unfortunate. There's a joint venture agreement issued by the DNR. The FPIC is still an issue. So it's a, and with all due respect, the government agency, they're wishy-washy, okay, sometimes. And then this is a very, very big challenge, because 2015, the provincial government with the DNR, okay, they actually looked into this resort. Beautiful. It's forest land, but surprisingly, there was a title. So local government units and the DNR had to deal with it and to address it. So it's a beautiful resort, but you can see up close that there's mangrove poles used in the Sunlight Resort. That's premium hardwood ipil wood, okay, mangroves again. And where can you find, this is preposterous for me, where can you find garbage bins made of ipil, premium hardwood? Never in my whole life. So it's really unconscionable, you know. Now, a case was filed on this, but it's unfortunate that I'm wondering why the search warrant was quashed and the government was forced to settle. There's 250 million pesos, a settlement amount. But what happened in the recent Commission on Audit report on the funds, the company paid only 120 million. So there's still a balance. And that amount has yet to be used by the Palawan Council for Sustainable Development. So it's still a never ending. It's a story that needs to be monitored. Fishery law enforcement in the West Philippine Sea. There was an attempt by the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, okay, assisting the fishers in Zambales and Palawan, in Kalayaan. But what happened, the challenge here was that the fishers were so vulnerable to pressure that they changed their statements. It was the Solicitor General, if you recall, who said that. So eventually, had to was dismissed. But I think it's very important that cases of this nature need to be explored because weak enforcement was a big issue there. Now, ill-planned infrastructure projects, they also abound in this country. You know, reclamation, I actually am glad that in Dumaguete, there were efforts to pressure the local government unit not to enter into an agreement with an entity which wants to build a very, very big complex in the reclamation site. So road expansion, you cut trees, and in areas, example, like Palawan, you do not need a 6-lane highway. Kaliwa Dam is an issue on EIA, and then an inter-island bridge, and the Bulacan Airport complex, among many others, because there are many others. So here, this modesty aside, we were able to stop through not through court, but through dialogues with government agencies. And Dr. Miguel Fortes was the one who gave his opinion on the likely impacts of an inter-island Coron-Culion bridge. So it's good to enlighten our government officials about the bigger picture because you build a 4.5 billion inter-island bridge, but is that necessary in that area? There's no study, okay? And then the policy on the issue, so that's weak enforcement on policy on energy. If you look at the Philippine Energy Plan, it's still heavily reliant on coal, okay? And there's still a lot of service contracts, as you've seen, on oil and petroleum, and then coal. Well, Semirara coal is low quality, but that's the source of the coal for the coal plant in Nara, Southern Palawan. So we're still we're importing coal from Indonesia. We do have a Renewable Energy Act, okay? So we need to actually push for green energy options. Oh, this is a coal ash case in Cebu. So coal ash is still a problem. In Bataan, a woman leader there was killed, Gloria Capitan, okay, to fight the coal plant there. So coal ash has not been managed well. It's still a pollutive source. And so that's energy. And we take a look at mining. RA 7942, with all due respect to those who legislated on it, it's still actually, it needs to be amended to make sure that the Philippine government, the Philippines, gets a share as owner of the minerals. So the concept of economic rent. So that's pending. There used to be EO 79, which imposed a moratorium on mining, but that was lifted a few months ago. And what is troubling now is mining has been identified as a key industry for economic recovery from COVID. So you see Tampakan, okay, and then 21 abandoned mines have not been resolved yet. There's still a lot of risk. And the Bagakay copper mine in Samar, to rehabilitate that, we need to borrow 34.7 million from the World Bank. So why do taxpayers have to pay for that? Marinduque, the cases are still ongoing. That's not been resolved. And this is a case, again, on enforcement. That's key, but this is natural forest, rich in biodiversity, but the mining company has now applied for an MPSA and was issued by the DNR a mineral agreement. Now, we cannot forget Tampakan because there's an environmental code that actually bans open pit mining. The area is rich in biodiversity. It's a fault line. There will be agricultural lands affected, about 2,000 farmers. This is the ancestral domain, and a human rights assessment showed that even a responsible, a responsible mining company, but with the with this type of mining of such magnitude could not be feasible, could not be considered feasible. Oceana Gold here, the local government unit led by the provincial governor actually opposed. But then the FTAA was renewed. So these are issues. And I'm showing Padkal Benguet because if just to highlight the fact that our Mining Act provides for a contingent liability rehabilitation fund as a policy issue. But if you look at the funds, okay, how much did Felix pay? 5.5 million, okay, half a million for environmental trust fund. But look at the violations. They were fined 1 billion for tailings fee and 92 million for 3 violations of the Clean Water Act. So essentially, whatever funds we have under the mining law are definitely not enough, okay, to cover the destruction. So you need to take a hard look into the policy. Threats to environmental defenders, I need to highlight this. There's cyber libel. There's a libel case against Mary Lou, filed by Filminera and many others. And for some, there are cases, but for another group, they have been killed. Lawyers have also been killed. And the passage of the Anti-Terrorism Act actually creates uncertainty. So fortunately, under the rules, we have the strategic lawsuit against public participation. But as I speak, there are ongoing cases. A barangay captain in Brooks Point, modesty aside, we were able to dismiss 6 cases filed against him by a mining company. And I think Mr. Yor also has a libel suit, no, and many others. Okay, before I close, because there's many things to talk about. In recent developments, I highlighted some, and I think you can share. Climate change litigation is interesting. It's also good to highlight the efforts of our environmental lawyers and local communities to actually sustain litigation. The public trust doctrine in the Maynilad case is good to highlight. Mainstreaming ecosystem values. You use total economic valuation, high conservation value assessment, cost-benefit analysis, and integrate this with our policies, local policies, and also in our cases. That's very interesting. And then the recent pronouncement of the UN Human Rights Council on the human right to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And then lastly, how do we integrate environmental law in the sustainable development goals? Because we do have a goal and there are localized efforts to express SDGs in the municipal and provincial level. So climate change litigation, you have been exposed to the Milio Defensi case, okay, where Shell was actually ordered by the court to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030. Okay. But I'd like to share with you not a judicial remedy, but a human rights inquiry here before the Commission on Human Rights. And this is against the carbon majors, 47 fossil fuel companies, and this requested for investigation. That's one of the, I think, legacies of Chairman Chito Gascon, who died recently. So this was led by Greenpeace and the Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement. And the facts, as we know, through attribution science, the research of Dr. Heedy and CIEL, etc., and many other groups have shown that the carbon majors, these 47 fossil fuel companies, have actually played a clear role in the anthropogenic climate change. So 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions are attributed to them. So the science has been established and it's ongoing. And according to the key commissioner investigating, these are some of the preliminary findings. We're still waiting for the resolution, but it's very important to take stock of what he said in various fora, that we do need to look into other cases. Okay, so this is an opportunity for us. Criminal liability, for instance, and then for civil society, we need to continue to explore strategic litigation, evidence-based strategic litigation. And then there's a climate change observatory. You can actually check on the CHR website. It is a repository of all our witnesses, the statements, the documentary evidence. So there's a wealth of information there. Okay, scientific and legal information. So attribution science, many witnesses testify there, and also the fact that we need to explore civil and criminal remedies plus policy reform. Okay, and then public interest litigation are many, and these are the in various cases I have seen, this is the objective. Okay. It's not just asserting a rights, compelling government to do their job, to do its job, effective implementation of the laws. In some cases, it's pushing for rehabilitation and stoppage of the destructive activity. Okay. Um, the marine mammals of Tanyan Strait, you've probably heard about this. It highlighted that the service contracts need to be signed by the president and authorized by a general law, okay, and reported to Congress. There's a violation of the EIE system and also the NIPAS law at that time. Boracay Foundation stressed on the need for consultation. This is a reclamation project, and therefore the court said that there must be consultations with the local government units. So this is a leading case if you want to highlight the role of local communities and local government units um, in shaping, okay, development projects. Okay, and then Greenpeace, while this has been reversed, but the important thing to consider here is the precautionary principle, because the Bacillus thuringiensis, BT talong, was the tests here were enjoined for propagation and commercialization because the question was whether it was safe for food consumption. And the precautionary principle was applied because of the three features present: uncertainty, possibility of irreversible harm, and the possibility of serious harm. So all of this, according to the High Court, justified the application of the precautionary principle. But in the Mosqueda case on the aerial spray ban, the court did not apply that, okay? Because they said that there must be scientific studies as well that would show that. But the the well, the bad news I would say was that it was dismissed because it was moot since the trials already were completed. However, it's good to note that the precautionary principle is still there. So perhaps there's an opportunity to institute future actions invoking that. And then the public trust doctrine. It is not, I would say, public interest litigation, but it's an initiative of the government to actually sue the water providers, okay? And according to the High Court, the public trust doctrine can be applied, can be enforced even against government agencies. So here, they were charged and fined for 40 million for violating the Clean Water Act because they failed to establish the needed mechanisms, okay, to protect our water systems. Now, mainstreaming ecosystems values, this is good. The total economic valuation in one protected area showed that if you mine the area versus protecting it, so it's a protected area, the value of ecosystem services and goods far outweigh the cost of the mineral. So 266 billion pesos versus 15 billion. So it's a substantial difference. And there are many studies. I know Ma'am Gina had 2 studies in Bicol and also Southern Palawan. And there's a study by Conservation International with the Center for Conservation Innovations and many others on high conservation value assessment. So this is an important effort because we can integrate this in our legal and advocacy interventions. The World Bank attempted to push for wealth accounting and valuation of ecosystem services, but then it was stalled. So I think we need to push for that, okay? And then the UN Declaration to a Healthy Environment, okay? This is very interesting. And the states are encouraged to implement this, to share good practices, and to build capacities, among others. So we do have a constitutional provision, but this is an important development. So it's an added layer, a basis for us to push for our litigation and our advocacy, and also encouraging others to develop our environmental laws. And then my last few slides, environmental law and sustainable development goals. Okay, how do we integrate environmental law with SDGs? So there are a lot of options. I'm quoting here former DNR EMB Director Attorney Amado Tolentino. His thoughts were there can be a range of options how we can do this because there are 17 sustainable development goals. I'd like to highlight the use of economic instruments like polluter pays principle or tax incentives. Clean Water Act provides for that. But I think it's not articulated in the local ordinances. So something to think about. And then coordination, because this is a cross-cutting theme. You know, how do we make sure that the Philippine Development Plan captures this? It's mentioned there actually in the in the PDP 2016 to 2022 or 2017 to 2022. There's mention of the Sustainable Development Goals, but you also see the conflict with the Build project and also the economic perspective. So I think that's the challenge. And this is my slide. Thanks a lot for listening. I think given the environmental issues and the developments, we do have a lot of inspiring work to build upon as environmental law professors, environmental advocates, environmental litigators. So to the Legal Education Board, to Matthew, to the judges, the environmental planners, I see them, and to all the environmental law professors and advocates, thank you for listening. Mabuhay.
Thank you, Attorney Maya Anda, for that very substantive lecture. We now move on to the question and answer proper. To our participants, if you have any question, you may click the raise hand button in the reaction function located in the right side of your screen. You may also send your questions in the chat box and we will just read it for you. So I noted we have a participant commented from Maria Yulpa Maninas. She commented that her mom is from Malay Aklan, part of which is Boracay, and the residents, both natives and foreigners, are doing their best in keeping Boracay clean. However, it
Yes.
appeared that the government had approved the construction of casinos in the island despite the strong opposition put up by the people. So she thinks that everyone should know already how Boracay has seen so much constructions of concrete structures since the 90s. This is sad development in as much as an environmental issue as it is cultural and otherwise the construction has reportedly started.
Mhm. Thank you very much, ma'am, for those for that information and for sharing your insights. I hope that there can be um, actions, legal actions or advocacy interventions because I congratulate you for your petition, for your opposition. But as I said, I think previously, you have to complement that with other strategies. So you may need to do planning. This is unsolicited advice, but it would be good to get support outside of Boracay, like the Dumaguete reclamation. There was a howl of protest from the scientific community, from the barangays, from communities, fisherfolk, and also from scientists. So they did not have to go to court for that, although they're monitoring that. And so with the Inter-Island Bridge project, but I think with Boracay, if it's imminent, um, the rules of procedure for environmental cases can be an option to consider. But you need to plan and strategize. Good luck po, ma'am.
All right. So Mr.
Thank you.
Charlton
Thank you
Jules
so
comment.
much.
Thank you, ma'am. So Mr. Jules Romero also answered and commented to Miss Manina's comment. He said that it seems like the number one violator is the government. So unless we have champions leading the significant environmental agencies all the way up to the city hall, I guess this would not happen.
Yes. I also agree that if you look at the issues like weak enforcement, it's essentially governance, institutional, because I mentioned about corruption. So I share that sentiment as well, although we engage with the government and there have been mandamus cases already and even ombudsman cases against certain officials. And I also agree that hopefully the 2022 elections can be an opportunity for us, for even for environmental lawyers to shape the discourse, the voters' education. That's a lot of work, but we have to do our thing so that we can see changes in the governance. For that insight.
Sorry, Mary, you're on mute.
So we have a question from Sir Alfred Manzano. So he said that, what is your take on responsible mining?
Yeah, and I also like to answer, I think, Ma'am Torres, about technology and fossil mining. Thank you for that question. Now, the in the study where led by the Ateneo School of Government years ago, there's a material for that, and Modis aside was part of that study. We do not have responsible mining yet in the Philippines because of our institutional issues. Okay, with enforcement and our policies. As I said, mining, how much government is taxes. Of course, we can have the social development management program, but we are not paid as owner of the minerals. In fact, former such as President of Carpio, in the case of Gal, he said that we do not get a single centave from mining. And the contribution of mining it ranges between 1 to 2%. Excess tax 1% is small compared to agri. So we do have to craft a new mining now. On the knowledge, because I also spoke before for Japanese.
Attorney Anda, there
Yes,
seems to be a problem with your audio.
Okay. Am I clear now?
Now, not yet, ma'am. We can hear some background sound. I think you're choppy.
Is that okay?
Yes, better,
Okay.
ma'am.
Sorry for the, I think it's the, as I said, responsible mining does not yet exist in the Philippines while that is being promoted because it's complex. You have to make sure that the policy is in place, as I said, so that the state benefits a lot, as owner of the minerals. We do not have that yet. Plus, you can see even in the mining audits, more than 20 companies were suspended, and unfortunately, almost all of them have come back, okay, and have been allowed to operate. Plus, mining in protected areas, in natural forests, in ancestral domains, black sand mining in the northern Luzon. I wanted to mention that a while ago. That's illegal. So it's really a big challenge. We have to work on that, and institutional arrangements and policy must be in place, capacity building, etc. On technology, I want to explain that Tesla and also I think Toyota is promoting electricity run vehicles, and they're relying on the nickel that comes from Palawan. And I was shocked to hear that. And I said, don't you know that the source of the nickel is not only ancestral domain, but old growth and secondary growth forest. And it's a watershed. So I think we have to look for other options. It's not simply that because, electricity cars are needed. It's just like fair trade. Where's the source of your nickel? You have to look into the source because there are environmental justice issues there. So thank you. Yes.
We have some other comments in the chat box. So we'll just read one more before we go toward the wellness break. So let me read. Okay, so this is from
Yeah, okay.
Maki.
The
Maki.
Mandamus Garcia ruling.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's an opportunity, Maki, for our own advocacy work to engage with local government units so that the additional ERA funds for the internal revenue allotment can be allocated for social justice projects, for environmental and conservation programs, because they need help on how to actually effectively craft comprehensive land and water use plans, disaster risk reduction and management plans. They do not integrate the ancestral domains there and the forest land use plans. There's an attempt, but now with additional funds, we need to really engage. And I think if we can do trainings for local government units, okay, that would be good. So we have to be on, we have to monitor that, Maki. Plus, I think my last point is the national government has recently issued a lot of circulars to devolve a lot of the functions from health, environment, okay, agriculture to local government units in light of the Mandanas ruling. Thank you.
All right. So I guess for the other comments and other questions raised in the chat box, we can discuss it with Attorney Grady, and we can send her the emails. The email through email, we can send her the questions that we have raised. So we will now move on to the wellness break. But before we do that, we will just like to award the certificate of appreciation to our resource speaker for today, Attorney Griselda Mayo Anda. The Legal Education Board presents the Certificate of Appreciation to Attorney Griselda Mayo Anda, Executive Director of the Environmental Legal Assistance Center, or ELAC, for sharing her time, knowledge, and expertise as resource speaker during the Environmental Law Teachers Online Training Program, 4th session, with the topic Key Environmental Issues and Recent Developments in Environmental Law, held via Zoom virtual conference and given this 20th day of October in the year of our Lord 2021 in Manila, signed by the Chairperson of the Legal Education Board, Chair Ana Marie Melanie B. Trinidad. Thank you so much, Attorney Griselda Maya, and for a very
Yes.
wonderful lecture, and we appreciate for the continuation of your lecture from our first session.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Mabuhay.
thank you po. So before we go on to the wellness break, we would just like to announce that we will be having a breakout room session after the 5-minute break. So for the breakout room session, I would just like to read the instructions to guide you in our session. So there will be 8 breakout rooms which with assigned topics. Participants can choose which topic he or she prefers and enter the room of the chosen topic. Each room shall accommodate a maximum of 15 participants each. If the room exceeds the maximum number of participants, we kindly request the participants to enter another room instead. To enter the room, you just have to click the join button, and the purpose of the breakout room is to encourage an interactive and substantive discussion among the participants using the Google Slide as an online learning tool to discuss the key environmental issues and challenges in the country. In the breakout rooms, participants are given 30 minutes to discuss the topics on the issues and challenges of the assigned room and those found in the Padlet related to the topic of your group. So we remind everyone, for those who haven't shared their insights in the Padlet, you can do so during the break. Each group shall assign also a note taker and a reporter for their presentation. Participants shall use the Google Slide in presenting their output, and the link for the Google Drive will be posted in our chat box. So at the end of the 30-minute session, the room will automatically close and the host will monitor the time and give a reminder before the room closes. And after that, participants will then go on to the main room for the sharing of their group's output using the Google Slide. For the report template, as I've said, we will be using a Google Slide as an online tool to guide you in your discussion. So you can kindly access the link in our chat box, and you will also find in the Google Slide your group number within each slide. So please use this for their discussion and just input your insights under the 2 columns, issues and challenges. Should you need more space for the slide, please just click on the right side, on the side on the left, and click duplicate. So we will now go on to have our 5-minute wellness break, and we hope to hear from you again after our break.
So again, thank you everyone. Sorry for some of the technology with the video not showing, and I certainly agree. one of our attorney colleagues who made the point that it's very good to be able to actually see faces and being able to respond. One day we may even be able to do this again in person, which I'm looking forward to. So the next sort of session, and we've got 30 minutes before the close of this, is to first of all have some reporting back from the breakout rooms, and I'm going to ask first of all someone from the Human Rights and the Environment group to report back, and if we could do that in a couple of minutes, that's great. But I also wanted to so Gabs can share the Google slide screen. But I also wanted to just sort of refer back to some of the technology that we've used for this session. So we've had, in terms of pedagogy, we've had a lecture, a guest lecture, and again, the amount of information in that guest lecture by Attorney Jyoti, was exceptional. There's a whole range of topics that she focused on that can influence how students will then respond, and you can just have a question and answer, or you can then go in further and identify key topics that can then be further discussed. So obviously a guest lecture, and I think there's a richness in the Philippines, certainly on environmental lawyers and law topics of people who can talk about particular issues as they relate to your course. The second thing is the Padlet, and I think, Gladys, are you able just to show that Padlet screen of the map?
Sure, Matthew.
Thank you. And so very quickly, Padlet is a very simple tool because I can use it, and it's always good when practicing attorneys can use it. So we've got the Padlet that people can, and the first one on the map, it was a way of enabling people who look at things in a spatial way or a visual way, that they could put an image on a map and then link it to either a photo or a topic that can relate to the subject matter for discussion. Thanks, Gladys. And so here, we can see all of these dots, and I was putting some of those dots when Attorney Jyoti was speaking, that highlight, particular issues, and they can then become projects that we can then, could be taken. We could ask students at the beginning of a course about particular issues, and then we could ask them, taking into account those things, can they then, put on some photos, put on some discussions, put on some links to issues there. So, and then Gladys, if you could go to the next Padlet, the environmental challenges. And so this was using Padlet in a different way. But if you could scroll down the environmental issues topic, something that someone did there under, I think it was, yes, the Facebook. So can you click on that, Gladys? So this is sort of the excitement of how, and just scroll down a little bit. So this was how, you can link those topics on Padlet to sort of issues, and this is obviously a Facebook page about an environmental incident, and it can be linked to, something or some topic or some issue that shows that it gives the students the ability to do a real lot of interesting work using the Padlet. So Gladys, if we could go back then to the Philippine Environmental Law Challenge and onto the environmental law cases, if you could just scroll down a little bit to the next thing. Yeah, and if you could click that document that says decision. And again, here is the, someone has posted a decision of a case and the reasoning and various other things that can then be downloaded. It can then be used to actually have a copy of the case online. It could then be also linked to sort of images and and evidence that was in that case, and that can then provide that discussion. And so that shows how this Padlet people, especially the students, can post things, post videos, and it expands sort of the way that they can interact. And if you're doing a discussion about a case, for example, this could be, you could just focus on one case, a specific case that might be very important or very relevant. It could be Posa and Factorum, it could be the resident marine mammals, or a number of other important cases that can then, you can ask students, okay, look at that, post images about it, post reasoning, post stories, post other ideas about that. So this is the type of discussion, and thanks, Gladys, for that. And we can go now back into the reporting back session. I think if you could stop sharing the screen, that would be great. Thank you. So the idea of this is using those tools. They're fairly simple, but it also gives the students an opportunity to be creative, and that's part of how we can try and engage our students. We can then focus on whether we want to discuss a law and get cases around that law, or focus on a case and then get them to add things or add images. Alternatively, they can be focused on a particular issue that concerns them, and they can then make that one of their projects to demonstrate how that issue relates to the law and the cases that they may know. So, and environmental law principles. So thank you very much for that. And if there are any questions, we'll have question time at the end, so people can comment on whether they thought that was an effective use of Padlet and the maps and guest lecturing and the breakout rooms. So can we first then ask the Human Rights and Environment group, which is one of the two popular groups, for someone to give a presentation there? That would be great. If you could come off mute.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
I'm here.
Thank
yes,
you very much.
I'm Associate Dean Sarangay here. So I was tasked to report the inputs of my teammates regarding human rights and the environment. So there are about 6 issues identified by our team. So number 1, as mentioned by Professor Luanzon, it is already a given that our Supreme Court and our government already gave due recognition to our constitutional right to a balanced and healthful ecology. And that is the gift to us in the case of Oposa versus Factoran. And there are also several other cases which confirm this in several other ways and fashion. Nonetheless, one main obstacle to the enforcement of this right would be technicalities. So Professor Luanzon, for instance, cited the Abogado case, wherein the counsel there was alleged to had not been properly engaged by the clients, and that was raised personally by the Office of the Solicitor General, and that led to the dismissal of the case. So, and I believe that the environmental lawyers here may have thought or may have witnessed other instances wherein environmental cases are dismissed due to technicalities. Number 2 is the with regard to IPRA, wherein one of our professors, Professor Libiran, one of the members of the team, emphasized the lack of full and proper implementation of its provisions, particularly the free, prior, and and informed consent, the role of the NCIP, as well as the lack of personnel with proper expertise. So Professor Libiran cited that the NCIP does at present, so you may confirm this with Professor Libiran, does not have an anthropologist, and that serves as an obstacle mainly in identifying the domains to be protected. And also, as regards the legal clinics, one of our deans who was part of the group mentioned Red Tagging and Anti-Terrorism Act. And in fact, one of the members of the team informed us that she's a petitioner in the constitutional challenge to the Anti-Terror Act. So this prevents the volunteers of these legal clinics from advocating environmental rights. Also, as far as law schools, there appears to be lack of interest in advocating environmental rights other than tree planting or other similar activities. As for right to livelihood, which is also considered a right, in fact, a constitutional right protected by the Due Process Clause, but to correlate this with the right to a balanced and healthful ecology, because of the improper utilization or abuse of our environment, then the livelihood of, for example, our fishermen, farmers are affected due to abuse. And lastly, was also Professor Luanzon who raised this, as regards the teaching process, because knowledge of our rights is very important. Now, in relation to law schools, a challenge would be to inform the students that case laws are not just assignments, but are real life problems that are being encountered by real people in a real environment. So that's it for us. So thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you very much indeed, Associate Dean. So can we then move on to the second group, Gab? I think the second group is Protected Areas Management. If we could have a spokesperson, and again, if we could keep it to, I'm sorry about the time, but 2 minutes would be great. So. We have a volunteer from the Protected Areas Management Group. Hello. You may be on mute. I'm not, if you're. Is there someone from Group 2 able to present? Aries Matabag or Attorney Juma?
So we would like to call in members of Group 2 on Protected Areas Management. Would anyone from the group would like to share their group's output?
Something. Okay, so we'll go to Group 3 if we can. Maybe there's some technical problems. If you could put up your hand if you're from Group 2 and want to speak, that would be great. But can we go to Oceans and Fisheries?
Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning.
Right. Good morning. I'll be reporting for Group 3, or Oceans and Fisheries. But before that, I would like to highlight our discussion a while ago, and that the team comprises of the diversity and also the background. One came from the actual experience teaching in and also doing the seminar in Bantay Dagat and Bantay Kalikasan. That's Attorney Maki, and also the other two participants in our breakout room. One came from before, and who transitioned to POW with treasure trove of experiences in terms of the protection of the environment and defending the the people who are actually fighting for environmental causes. And some of us came from the academy, which provide more insights on how to deal with the actual cases on hand. So now we're going to discuss with the issues that we tackle or we discuss in our small group. One is by the lack of political will by our local chief executives to implement local fisheries ordinance and national laws. Second would be the lack of capacity of local legislative to enact appropriate ordinances, especially they're merely copying the national laws and change the penalties. We are actually insightful that it should be specific to a particular LGU as each LGU is unique. Three, black sand mining, which the DNR itself issued the permit and issued the guidelines without taking into consideration the fisheries and oceans. And number four, indiscriminate cutting of mangrove for economic gains. And lastly, a state of overfishing in several fishing areas. What are the challenges? These are balancing economic needs, poverty, especially with the marginal fishermen or fisher folk, vis-a-vis the implementation of the laws. A second would be the scientific and local-based ordinances. Third, conflicting guidelines of DNR and national laws in fisheries protection. Fourth, during the closed season, there should be a strict implementation and monitoring so that it would not be unfair to those who are complying. With these, on the fourth challenge that we mentioned, during the closed season, there should be some sort of support for those in compliance with the closed season policy laid down by the law. However, currently, those who are in complying felt that they are marginalized for being in compliant with the law, and who are those in gaining or benefiting for not complying. So um, there's a challenge in terms of for those who are in compliance with the law and for those who are not in compliance with the law in terms of the closed season uh, laid down by the law. And lastly, uh, how to manage fiscal gains by the LGU in case that the mandamus ruling would be implemented. Those are the issues and challenges that we discussed in our small group discussion. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you very much indeed. And I think there are clearly a lot of interesting issues that have been raised. So we'll also now go on to our next group 4.
Good morning.
Environmental crime.
Environmental crime.
My favorite topic, I have to say. Thank you, attorney.
And I have there. Okay. So they requested me to be the reporter. Anyway, I'll try to finish the report in 2 minutes as Matthew requested. Okay. So the first one under the issues is lack of knowledge of environmental law enforcers. We thought of it as an issue because very often when a law enforcer discovers a crime, the law enforcer does not know, or they do not know what crime the offender will be charged, because they do not know the elements of the crime. They also do not know what evidence to gather and what to do with the evidence after gathering or collating them. So fulfillment of that issue, we thought of capacity building mechanisms and skills and knowledge trainings for environmental law officers, meaning a seminar or a training for them to be able to distinguish at first instance what crime the offender has committed and what are the elements of that crime and what are the evidence, the pieces of evidence they have to gather and to collect for a successful prosecution of the offender. So let me go to number 2. Number 2 is codification of ordinances implementing environmental laws. Of course, not all LGUs or not every LGU has a codified, has a code on the environment. So we would like all LGUs to have a codified ordinance on the environment, such that well, it will highlight and it will give emphasis on the the varying role of the LGUs in the implementation of our environmental laws. Of course, we all know that under the Solid Waste Management Law, the LGU has a primary responsibility in the implementation. But as regards the Clean Air Act, the role of the LGU is to share in the responsibility with the national government. So we would like to highlight the role of the LGUs. And we think that codified ordinance on the environment will be the answer, or to address that lack of codification. As a challenge, we thought of the budget. And of course, we would want a sanggunian, which is, eco-friendly, so that they will be enacting ordinance relating to the environment. Okay. Let's go to number 3, awareness of our indigenous peoples on environmental laws. What we meant here is awareness of of course. Let me point out that while we have this IPRA law is not a give-all to our indigenous people. We have other environmental laws, and sometimes our indigenous people may not be aware that some acts are in violation or not in harmony with the other environmental laws. So we thought of, to address this, we thought of conducting seminar or information campaign to our indigenous peoples, so that the IPRA law may be reconciled with the other environmental laws. Okay, and that there are also limitations on the rights of our indigenous people. Okay, number 4 is jurisprudence on the interpretation of specific provisions of environmental laws. We thought of this as an issue because sometimes there are differing opinion of judges and prosecutors. So we would want a knowledge for the judges and the prosecutors on the correct interpretation of a specific provision of an environmental law or natural resources law, so that the interpretation would be uniform, so that it will be uniform for all judges and prosecutors all over the country, so that there cannot be any difference in the interpretation of our law. So we, to address that issue, we thought of a continuing, legal education for judges and prosecutors on environmental laws. At present, we have specially designated courts, but for single sala courts are also environmental courts, but there is no seminar or training for the single sala courts. So we thought of a continuing education for judges and prosecutors. Okay, number 5 is designation of special prosecutors for environmental cases. While there is a provision in the rules of procedure for environmental cases providing for a designation of a special prosecutor, but not all jurisdictions, meaning not all prosecutor offices have special prosecutors, meaning special prosecutors who will handle and who will take charge of environmental cases. There is also it's like as many prosecutors as you have, as many interpretations there are of the law. So we want a uniform interpretation of these crimes, which the prosecutors will, where the prosecutors are charged to file the information. So we need a uniform interpretation of all these crimes, such that the prosecutor would be familiar with the elements of the crime, especially that with regard to environmental crimes, there is this exception that exception to the multiplicity of suits, such that an act can give rise to several cases because there are different elements violated. There are specific elements for each environmental crime.
Okay, thank you
And
very
to
much
address,
indeed. Sorry,
okay.
I'm sorry, we'll have
To address
just
that,
because,
we would like the Department of Justice to, well, designate prosecutors in every office. I hope that that completes
thank you, ma'am.
everything.
No, that's great. And so now we'll move on quickly to Group 5, which is Natural Resources Management. So do we have a presenter for Group 5?
Hello, Matthew. Can
Yes,
I
Mary?
suggest, do we
Thank
have
you.
Attorney Soriano? Sir, are you available to report on the group's behalf? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, but can we, can you share us the, there you are, no? That's our, okay, okay. Okay, so we were only 3 here in the group 5, me, Attorney Soriano, Attorney Pakatang, and Attorney Romero. And our discussion on the challenges is number 1, a sustainable natural resource management, which is the general attitude of the community to participate. And another challenges is the local government project as opposed by local residents, and issues on after end of contracts of mining companies that have already expired after the 25 years and again renewed, again by the local government, and some are opposed also by the local governments, like in Nueva Vizcaya, where the mining company, their contract had expired in 2019, and the provincial government as well as the provincial people proposed this, but after a while it was renewed. So that's another challenges. And then of course, under the local government code, the local government units are authorized to enter, number 1, to manage their own municipal waters, and to enter into an agreement on reclamation project within their municipal waters. So the issue here is, of course, the balancing of interest between development and conservation of our natural resources. And of course, well, in the case of Laguna Lake Development Authority, the Supreme Court tried to harmonize the powers of the national government vis-a-vis the powers of the local government units. First, on issuing mining permits. Second is the management on their municipal waters. And then the third is the authority of the government, both the local and the national government, to enter into contracts or agreements with regards to reclamation projects, which is, of course, had an environmental impact. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Attorney Soriano. And so we can now move on to Group 6. And I think that's environmental litigation. This was a very popular topic, like same number of people with human rights and the environment. So Group 6, is there a particular presenter? I'm going to still have to ask you to keep to 2 minutes if that's possible.
Hello, good morning. I'm Attorney Ventura. I was tasked to report on Group 6 with respect to the issues and challenges of environmental litigation. We have identified, I think, can I ask please that we have identified at least, I think, 7 or 8 issues and challenges. As to the issues, one of our one of our group mates have identified an issue that there was a case that the tax declaration was used as a basis of the somehow the acquittal of the accused in an environmental case against him, that the tax declaration in the name of the accused prevailed over a declaration of a forest land. That's the first issue that we have raised. Second, with respect to plea bargaining, of course, on the part of the defense, they would like to plead guilty to the lowest sentence that can be meted to the accused. But sometimes, as an issue, the court requires still the consent of a representative from the DNR, which most of the time also they will not give their consent to the lowest possible penalty, aside from the consent of the prosecutors. Third issue is that the public prosecutors may not have technical knowledge to handle environmental cases, and even MCTC and RTC judges who could sometimes decide in disregard of environmental laws. Fourth is that normally those who are sued for violation of environmental laws are the workers, and seldom that the employers face any liability. This fourth issue is true with respect to violations of PD 705, transporting forest products. Most of the times, it's only the drivers or the employees who are facing criminal charges, but it's very seldom that their employers who ask them to deliver such or to do such acts faces criminal liability. Fifth, that issue with respect still to trainings for prosecutors and judges. Six, the lack of proper communications between courts handling the criminal aspect and the specific office in handling the administrative seizure and or forfeiture procedure. We have one group mates who stated that there was a time that the court issued an order releasing a conveyance, which is still a subject of an administrative proceeding. So the DNR have to file manifestations to that effect. So based on these issues, we have identified challenges also with respect to litigation. First is the availability of witnesses. Sometimes there are few witnesses who could help in either prosecuting or in the defense of an accused. There is also a need to get expert witnesses because most of the time it involves technical issues. Availability and willingness of lawyers to handle environmental cases, difficulty in prosecuting the case, and sometimes it includes technical issues and lack of lawyers or judges, especially trained in environmental litigation. As to the fourth challenge, um, since environmental protection and management is everybody's civic duty, there should be also a training not only to lawyers and judges, but also to all citizens so that they could begin also to enforcing the right to a healthy environment and of course also to avoid a violation of any environmental law. And the as a challenge also, the DNR could open a memorandum of agreement with private lawyers to help them file complaints, motions, and pleadings. And lastly, the court should be notified of any administrative proceedings in relation to any criminal cases filed against an accused for violating any environmental law, so that issue number 6 as to confusions can be avoided. So basically, those are the issues and challenges that our group have identified with respect to environmental litigation.
Thank you very much. And Mary, can we keep going to get the last two? Is that possible, Commissioner Jojo? Is that
Yes, Mati.
so? If we go to quickly group 7, climate change, not that we want to rush any of the issues. Do we have a speaker for group 7?
Hello, good morning.
Thank you.
I am tasked to present the output of Group 7 on climate change. Now, as we discussed the issues and challenges in relation to climate change, we were actually guided with 3 points. And these are about impacts, coping up with climate change, and of course, the policies. Now, our group came up with at least 9 issues and also 9 challenges. And I'll go through with all these points quickly. The first issue is whether climate change is real or fiction, and which is of course related also to number 2, whether it's man-made. And also number 3, we say that climate change is real and it's a result of different environmental problems which are all man-made. And it's also identified by the group that industrialized countries, as regards its liabilities or contributions to climate change, must be looked into. And we have also looked into whether government response is sufficient and whether people are aware of the different issues in relation to climate change, and the balancing between development and environmental protection. And this one is very interesting as an issue. The concept of development, the present concept of development is wrong, because when we speak of development, we always think of infrastructure and other developments that are necessarily usually destructive of the environment. We have to at least shift to sustainable development. And the Paris Treaty is not mandatory and no penalties provided. Those are the issues we have identified. For challenges, many people oppose climate policies because climate policies are usually viewed as political and not necessarily environmental. And there's also another component about climate policies. It's about the economic aspect as well. And challenges on the government response, which are inadequate, and weather disturbances are getting more frequent. Many industries do not support climate initiatives. And we have number 5, can nature cope with development? And usually in the issues about climate change, it's the developed countries that dictate policies. And that's one of the challenges we have identified. And need enforcement mechanism, both on international policies or conventions, treaties, as well as, and also domestically. And then number 8, technological capacity of third world countries to comply. It's a challenge, and whether climate change impacts are reversible. In relation to that, we also have discussed about adaptation and coping up or maintaining the status quo in relation to climate change. Those are the issues and challenges we have identified.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Attorney Diaz. And now can I please call on the last group on waste, if they could give their presentation, please. Group 8. Do we have a presenter?
Attorney Heron, are you trying to speak, sir? You're on mute.
Thank you very much. This is for Group 8. We have identified 4 key issues. First is single-use plastic, the most pervading waste that proliferates in the Philippines. As of late, there's still no national law that bans or restricts the use of single-use plastic. There are diverse ordinances issued by various local government units that haven't been synchronized, and we need a national law. Second issue is solid waste management. We divided into 4 subcategories. 1, segregation of household plastic waste and medically related waste, like used surgical masks. Inefficiency on waste collection and lack of disposal facilities. Timely disposal of garbage on the streets. And lastly, lack of plastic collection points, such as the Nestle Plastic Collection Program. Now, local government units implementation and the facilities that they provide for solid waste differ. And we need to look for other sustainable alternatives.
Human resource management is a problem. Employee retention for garbage collectors, garbage men. And number 4, people will have to be trained not to place their garbage on the streets before the collection or the collectors come in. If there will be no trucks coming in, please don't do that. Our third key issue, medical waste arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. There's no national plan on medical waste disposal. There is, again, may we repeat that? There's no national plan yet on medical waste disposal. We are a nation of 100 million people using disposable masks every day, and we don't have a national plan on how to dispose of this very basic medical waste. Finally, the use of environmental criteria and government contracting. This is a worldwide trend. Environmental criteria in all government procurement contracts should be emphasized. Now, finally, one of the last challenges, we have seen that there is lack of funds to sustain all these efforts in waste and plastics management. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much indeed. Perhaps not such an optimistic note we finish on. The lack of a national plan to deal with medical waste after 2 years of the pandemic, I think is something that we all, very much worry about, especially where I'm living at the moment in Thailand. Again, I think even Thailand hasn't had any real focus on how to deal with all of the COVID-related waste, including, the millions and millions of test kits and masks and other things. So can I thank everyone, all of our participants. There are some amazing suggestions as well, and one about keeping the chat. And so I think, Gab, if we can capture the chat, we will try and, I think, go through it and just sort of delete some of the comments, but keep the questions and the responses there, because that can be a very important record. And more importantly, again, thank you very much for your participation. We would like to hear of how you thought that some of the tools and techniques we use to create the reports. There's certainly, in terms of the feedback from the sessions, that creates many issues, and perhaps there's some of the issues that we should also follow up with over the next few weeks. But can I thank you very much indeed, and hand back to Maria for some announcements about next week's course. So,
Thank you.
Salamat po.
Thank you also, Matthew, and thank you to all of our participants for participating in today's breakout room sessions. So before we end today's sessions, we would like to invite everyone to join us for an interview and share your comments, insights, and experience in our training program. The link for the interview form is sent in our chat box. You may fill it out to schedule an interview with us. And as a last reminder, please don't forget your registration form and the attendance form, as well as the evaluation form, to comply with our attendance requirements. We will also be sending to your email address the link for the next session in October 27 with the topic Syllabus Review Workshop. So kindly check your inbox and spam messages. Again, compliance for the at least 9 session is required for the issuance of the training certificate. So we hope to hear from everyone on October 27. So thank you very much for joining us in today's sessions. Have a lovely day.